welcome to Dr. Amber Thornton's Know and Grow podcast, where you're never alone in navigating life's biggest moments and toughest lessons. Join me, Dr. Amber Thornton, clinical psychologist, mother of two, as I explore motherhood, parenting, relationships, career, mental health, and the ongoing journey of personal evolution. No, it doesn't stop. These conversations will absolutely make you laugh, may make you cry, will get you to reflect, but more importantly, you'll grow and we'll get to grow together. So I'm glad you're here, and I hope that you'll come back. Tune in weekly for informative, thought-provoking, inspiring conversations right here with me. Hey, welcome back to Dr. Amber's Know and Grow podcast. Dr. Amber here. I hope everybody is having a great week, having a great day. At the time you're listening to this, I hope that you are feeling grounded, peaceful, all the things. Thank you for coming back. I really do appreciate that. This is technically our third episode of Dr. Amber's Know and Grow podcast. But as you can see, if you're listening on the podcast or even if you're watching on YouTube, this one I believe is episode 104. And of course, it's because you all know I've been podcasting for a very long time. And so either way, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm excited to be back for another episode of our podcast today. So let's get started with our astrology segment, some things that I'm thinking about. And I've been going back and forth about something that I want to talk about for this segment today. And I decided that what I want to kind of do is a build-up, because I believe that there might be some of you who, like me in the past, had interest in astrology, but also didn't really know where to begin and just felt kind of lost. And I don't want to dive into all of these like very complicated concepts and then you're listening and have no idea what I'm talking about. So part of me wants to kind of start with some of the basics with regard to astrology, all the while knowing, y'all, I'm not an expert in this. This is literally my exploration of something that brings me joy, my hobby. So we can explore this together. So you all know, if you've listened to the past episode, I loved astrology from a very young age. I was 16 working at a public library in my hometown. And when it was slow, I would go to the astrology section and literally just read the books on the floor. And this critique that I always get from people who don't like astrology is that it's so general, or it could apply to anybody, regardless of the sign, or it's not specific to what I'm going through, right? And that was fair, even though I didn't agree. But then once I finally realized that there was so much more than just your sun sign, it was like, oh, no wonder every Scorpio might be different in some way. No wonder the weekly horoscope we used to read in the magazine didn't necessarily reflect our life. And it's because you're only looking at one very small aspect of your whole birth chart. And when I realized that, it blew my mind. And so that's why, again, last week I talked about the Pattern app and how logging on there and seeing my birth chart and just seeing how unique it is in comparison to other people's charts is just so interesting to me. But it also helps you see, oh my gosh, I'm so much more than just my zodiac sign that I thought I was, right? So let's talk about the big three today. If you don't already know this, I want you to go look it up. You should get your birth chart, or there's lots of apps and websites where you can literally put in your birth details and then you will get your big three. And by your big three, I mean your sun sign, your moon sign, and your rising sign. So today I just want to share a little bit about what mine are. And then, of course, you all reach out to me, let me know about yours and how it has shaped your understanding of yourself. So all my life, I've known I'm a Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio, y'all. Did y'all know? Could you tell? Do I give Scorpio vibes? I'm a Scorpio, and that's my sun sign. So everybody probably knows their sun sign, and that's the one thing that they know for sure. Like, oh, I'm a this, I'm a that. My sun sign is a Scorpio. And so for me, that is just the core of who I am. Me in my natural state, I'm a Scorpio. And so the parts of me that reflect my Scorpio-ness I can be mysterious. I do have trouble opening up sometimes because I am so protected of my private thoughts, my private feelings, my private space. You would never guess it because I tend to be so public. I'm on a podcast right now where hundreds of people are listening. I'm on the internet where thousands of people watch me every day. But I definitely have this private part of me that I like to keep secret, but there's also so much depth to me. Those of you who know me really, really, really well, you know that there are layers to Amber. There are layers to me, and that is also a big quality or characteristic of Scorpio. I'm layered, I'm deep, but I also can be mysterious and pretty secretive with some things. I'm trying to work on that. But that's just me to my core. I'm very passionate, I'm very driven, and I'm just very focused. And that is my Scorpio sun. I am a Virgo moon, you all. And so, one thing I do love, one of my favorite astrology signs, honestly, is Virgo. Both of my parents were Virgo suns, but I also, fun fact, any assistant that I've had, any VA that I've had who was really, really good was always a Virgo. And it is because Virgos are so organized, detail oriented, focused on the small details. That's why they're so good at like the things that really require a lot of focus to small detail. Virgos are organized on it. I love working with Virgos. But discovering that I'm a Virgo moon, what that means is that for your moon sign, the way that I like to understand it is it can be reflective of how you manage or handle your emotions, but I also learned that it is really how you tend to react or respond um, in your most comfortable state, right? Like what types of states or environments make you most comfortable. And so for me, I love organization. I love focused on the small details. I'm really a stickler about routine and just kind of that part of me that is, I'm very consistent, I'm very routine, I'm very organized. I care about the small details because that's what makes me feel comfortable. That is my Virgo moon. That is my Virgo moon. So the part of me you all asks, how is it that you can stay so consistent about a number of things? My superpower is consistency, and it is because of my Virgo moon. Lastly, you all, let's talk about the rising sign. Your rising sign, the way that I understand it, is like your first impression. It's kind of like the vibe that you give off when you the vibe that you give off to the world, your surface self to the world in some way. There's probably another way that I could be understanding it, and that's why I wanted to learn more. But my rising sign is Aries, which is so funny because my daughter is an Aries sun, and so I feel like I understand those parts of her. But Aries are very powerful. They bring the heat. They are confident. They are loud, and they are not afraid. They are very direct. And so when I learned that, that actually surprised me. But I think what it is that that side of me sometimes is kind of buried. And when I'm my most confident self, that can come out. So let's talk about this more, y'all. Of course, we'll have another segment about astrology, but that's my top three or my big three. I'm a Scorpio sun, I'm a Virgo moon, and I'm an Aries rising. What are you? Tell me. I want to know how it impacts you. All right, well, let's get into today's topic. And what I want to talk about for today is this idea of imperfect parenting. And go with me here because this morning I knew I wanted to record this podcast, but I kind of was going back and forth on what I really wanted to talk about. I have a list of things that I want to talk about on this podcast. And for whatever reason, the list wasn't hitting today when I was looking at it and I was thinking, okay, what are you talking about today on the podcast? All these really good topics on my list, it was just like, this is not it. So, one thing that I'm trying to challenge myself to do is to show up authentically on here. And what that might mean is that there might be some weeks where I show up and I may not have these perfectly articulated thoughts. I may not have these perfectly articulated ideas. It might not be a, oh, top 3 this, 5 3 that. Sometimes it might be me just fleshing out my thoughts, my concepts in the moment. I empathize for those of you who don't like that style of podcasting, but this is me. This is me showing up who I am, and we're going to go with it. So, as I was getting ready this morning, realizing that I wanted to record this podcast but still not sure what I wanted to say, this thought came to me. And I'm going to just share the thought and then we'll process through it to make it make sense. And it was this: sometimes I am so afraid of making a mistake as a parent because I fear that it may traumatize my child in some way. I have a fear of making too many mistakes as a parent because I am afraid that it will traumatize my child in some way. I am afraid that it will lead to this disruption in our relationship that will not be able to be repaired. I am afraid that if I make too many mistakes as a parent, it will interfere with their ability to have a good quality of life, or it might interfere with their ability to be a optimally functioning adult who can navigate society, who can navigate their emotions, who can navigate socially. I am afraid that if I mess up too many times, it will mess up my kids and my relationship with my kids and their ability to be in the world. That was the thought. That is a legitimate fear of mine. I think that kept me for a really long time, partly not wanting to be a parent because I'm like, you mess up too many times, it messes up everything. I also think that that fear is what had me being so dysregulated in the early years of me being a mom. Let's be real, y'all, I'm still in the early years. My oldest is only 4. But when I think about, the first year, the first 2 years, the first 3 years, when I became a mom of 2 for the first time, that year, that first year of being a mom of 2, just the feeling of, if you make one more mistake, if you yell one more time, if you are too zoned out one more time, if you would withdraw 5 minutes too long, it's going to be over. I know that any fears that we may have, especially as parents, often can be traced back to our childhood. And I sometimes try to be really careful when I say things like that. You all know I'm a psychologist, and going to graduate school for psychology, it really transforms you, partly because it transforms the way you think about the world. Prior to me becoming a psychologist, I didn't know why people thought the way they thought. I don't know why people act the way they act. I don't know, but now I know. Now I know, how this person's reaction can be traced back to that thing 20 years ago, or this person's reaction can be traced back to that thing 5 months ago, or how this person's response is actually a reflection of something else going on deeper in here, or something else that they're projecting. And so my approach to psychology very much integrates a lot of what our earlier experiences are, in our childhood. So I believe that many of our fears as parents have something to do with maybe something we experienced before, or something that we just need to rework in our thinking that maybe we learned along the way, right? So then it takes me to, okay, how and why did we get to this point, or did I get to this point where I feel like, well, if I'm an imperfect parent, it's going to mess up something. It's going to mess up my kids. It's going to mess up. And when I think about it, there's this other thought that comes to me. And it is this: it's not your imperfections as a parent that are harmful. It's not inherently that. However, there are things that are harmful. And I think that if you too, like me, have this fear of if I mess up too many times or if I'm not the perfect parent, then something's going to go wrong. I think what's happening is that we have to tease out and separate these different experiences, right? So, for instance, I am one who had two imperfect parents. I think it's safe to say we all had imperfect parents. I don't know anyone who can say my parent was perfect. Nobody is perfect. So that's just a general human experience. We all have imperfect parents, right? So then when I think about, okay, well, what are the parts of my childhood that maybe harmed me or maybe hurt me? And it's not necessarily that they were imperfect, but rather maybe some traumatic shit actually did happen, right? There were a lot of things that happened in my childhood, we won't go into detail today, that were harmful. That were harmful. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's no room or space for imperfection as a parent, right? So, what could happen, and I think partly what happened to me is as a child, you grow up, you have these experiences with your parents. Some of them are just naturally because they're an imperfect human, and maybe a handful of them are truly experiences that negatively impacted your well being, your emotional well being, your physical well being, your psychological well being. And we then extrapolate because we're young and our frontal lobes are not fully developed. We start to associate, oh, well, it's because they weren't perfect. And that's why these things hurt, or that's why these things happen, when really it may have been this thing that's in this handful right here that was truly harmful. So I'm saying all this to say, because in my head, I'm like, make it make sense, Amber, make it make sense, get to the point, right? It's not your imperfections that are harmful, but there are some things that are harmful. And I want to talk about some of those other things that can be harmful instead. And I feel like this can be helpful, again, for those of you who find yourselves paralyzed in fear that I yelled too much yesterday, our relationship is over. And I'm laughing because it sounds so comical. But on the other hand, like I've literally had these fears. I've been paralyzed with fear, thinking that, oh my gosh, the first year of me being a mom of two, I was fucking nuts. Okay? I was yelling, I was screaming, and it's because I was overwhelmed. I was overstimulated. I had so much going on and I was transitioning in ways that I never could imagine. There were a lot of imperfections that came out of me that year. And I was also then paralyzed with fear that, my God, in 20 years, my kids are not even going to want to talk to me because when they were two and an infant, I couldn't keep my shit together. It's not my imperfections that are harmful, but something that is harmful, not addressing big emotions. That's harmful, right? I think that's something that all of us, especially those who are millennials, we are now coming to this understanding that many of us had parents who did amazing jobs. We're there, we're consistent, um, always present, made sure we had everything we needed. But there was something about our generation of parents where emotions was just not accessible. I don't think many of us as millennials were prepared to handle and manage our emotions. And that's why many of us now, as parents, find ourselves feeling dysregulated, so overwhelmed, not able to actually sit with our children's emotions, right? Like we've learned, luckily, through the internet and, just educating ourselves that, oh my God, it's actually really important to help your children address the feelings that they have. We can't just ignore them. We can't just pretend like they're not there. We can't just say, oh, I'm going to give you something else to cry about if you don't stop. We can't just say, well, take that shit to your room. We can't do that. That's harmful. And it can feel traumatic, especially if that happens too many times, or if it happens so intensely that that child feels like they have nowhere to go, and it doesn't feel like a safe space anywhere to share their feelings, right? That's why many of us now as parents today struggle with that. That is why I had to write a book about dysregulated parenting, because I struggled with that. I did not grow up as someone who knew how to manage their feelings. And y'all know I'm a Scorpio sun. The depths of my feelings are endless. I feel a lot of things. And so, me becoming a parent has been me realizing that I'm very much ill equipped with knowing how to handle my children's feelings, because I'm ill equipped with knowing how to handle my own feelings. I'm imperfect. I'm an imperfect human. I'm an imperfect parent, right? I have in my imperfections. And I realized that, okay, I need to learn how to handle my own feelings, handle my big emotions. Because if I don't, that is the thing that can be harmful to my children. That is the thing that can eventually become traumatic for my kids. It's not that I'm imperfect, right? But rather it's my willingness to move forward and fixing this thing that I now have this awareness of. That's harmful. And so now I'm doing the work. You all, side note, I have a love-hate relationship with that phrase, doing the work. I'm not gonna say that a lot. Like, I said it just now because I felt like it was like the perfect thing to say to help you understand what I'm trying to communicate. But I actually don't like that term, and maybe we'll get into that later. But now I'm doing the work. Doing the work of trying to fix that so that it's not harmful for my kids. So I do think that that is one thing that can actually be traumatic, right? Like this um, lack of nurturance, lack of lack of space made for just our emotional lives and our emotional selves. That's harmful for children in their development and their relationship with us. So let's talk about the other things that actually can be harmful. And I think, again, this is going to sound so, I don't know the word. Like when you hear it, you're going to be like, well, duh. And it's like, well, we have to say these things because we have, for whatever reason, turned into a group of people who are parents thinking that, oh, I'm imperfect. And that's the thing that's going to ruin my kid. When let's actually talk about the things that will ruin your kid, right? Abuse. Abuse, right? There's physical abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's mental abuse. Abuse, abuse, neglect, neglect. So, neglecting our child's needs, physical, emotional, otherwise, neglect, abuse and neglect. Those are abusive and traumatic, right? Those things are harmful. Actually, I'm just going to stop there because I feel like the people who are listening, again, for whatever reason, we got caught up thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't respond when he called me 3 times and it's because I'm so tired. That's going to be the thing that sends him to therapy. Or, oh my gosh, I raised my voice at her for the 5th time today because I'm so exhausted. The baby won't stop crying. The dog won't stop barking. The fan is too loud. I'm overwhelmed and I've raised my voice at her for the 5th time. She's going to hate me forever. And she won't be able to stop it. Stop. That's what we do. That's what we do to ourselves as parents. We take our everyday imperfections and turn them into these really big things that We think we'll just like interfere gravely with the lives of our children when really that's not the case. But you know what will? Abuse and neglect. Abuse and neglect. So, this is not me trying to undermine our imperfections. Imperfections are there. Um, Sometimes they can hurt, right? But I'm trying to give us this other way to reground ourselves so we're not so paralyzed in fear with regard to how we show up as imperfect parents. And I think that's what I needed today. And hopefully that's what some of you needed today too. It's not your imperfections as a parent that are traumatizing. And in fact, your imperfections as a parent are refreshing. It's good for your child to know that it's okay to make mistakes. It's good for your child to know that if I make a mistake, I can also come back and apologize. And I think that's also why I'm such a big proponent for please be an imperfect parent. But guess what? We have tools for this. We get to apologize to our kids now. We get to actually talk to our kids about that thing we did that hurt their feelings. And then what we do to repair those feelings, what we do to repair this relationship that was ruptured with this mistake I made, right? We get to acknowledge that mistakes can hurt, but they don't have to linger. And that's the beauty of addressing your emotions and being emotionally focused with our kids and also with ourselves as parents. It's not these imperfections and these imperfect moments that are going to mess up everything, but rather it's your inability to address the imperfections, your inability to be honest about it not feeling fair, about it being hurtful, about you making a mistake. That is traumatic. And that's not what I want for any of your children. And that's not what I want for you, because I know that that happened to you too many times. And that one too many times was the thing for you that maybe put you over the edge of feeling like my childhood maybe wasn't as safe as it could have been. But guess what? You get to fix that for your child, and it's not your imperfections. It's not. So let's close out today with our affirmation. I've got my deck. I'm shuffling the cards. I know we are running out of time because I try to keep these episodes under 30 minutes, because I just feel like as moms, as parents, as women, we already have so many other things going on, and ain't no way I'm gonna have y'all listening to me for 2 hours because I got stuff to do too. So let's pick a card. Everybody take a deep breath. I hope that this is something that you all can carry with you through the rest of the day. And again, thank you for being here today and listening to me talk about my fears and try to make sense of them. Okay, I'm gonna pick this one. Okay, so I almost put it back because I was like, this doesn't fit what we talked about today. But I'm going to read it, and maybe it'll be for one of you. Financial abundance comes to me easily and effortlessly. Okay. Financial abundance comes to me easily and effortlessly. I'm not going to throw this one away. It doesn't necessarily relate to what we talked about today, but maybe for somebody you needed this. And shit, maybe I need it too. Maybe this is confirmation that me showing up authentically and being my imperfect self can have rewards. And this is the universe telling me, hey, baby girl, be imperfect. Show up with unfiltered thoughts and unthought out concepts. And guess what? You're going to be financially abundant for it. Okay. One more time before I close it out. Financial abundance comes to me easily and effortlessly. I'll take it. All right, you all. I hope you all had an amazing time listening to this conversation. Reach out to me. Let me know what you thought about it. Also, leave a review today for the podcast and let me know specifically what you thought about this episode. I will talk to you all soon. Thank you so much for listening to Dr. Amber's Know and Grow podcast. I love that you're here. I love that we're learning together. We're growing together. We're navigating all these things together. We're really in this together. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave me a 5-star rating and review. That is so important because it helps this podcast grow. And it also gives me some feedback on how it's landing for you. Please share this podcast with someone that you love or someone that you know. And don't forget to connect with me on social media at Dr. Amber Thornton. I'll talk to you soon.